These are the vocabulary words for chapters 5 through 8 of Fever 1793. Our first word for chapter 5 is a strong box. And what a strong box was a way for a business, such as the coffee house that Maddie's family runs, to hold on to their valuable monies. So they didn't, run down to the bank, they didn't have an ATM card or anything like that. They had to keep their money stored in a locked, safe box. So, hence the name strong box. It was a strong box so that nobody could break into it. The second word you're going to hear is necessary. And you know the word necessary, like it's necessary that I do my homework. It is necessary that I do my chores. But in 1793, necessary had a totally different meaning. You would know it today as an outhouse. And if you think about it, the word necessary for using an outhouse makes sense because that task is a necessary task. The third word is Liebchen. And you're probably saying to yourself, wow, I've really never heard this word before. And unless you know German, you would not know this word. So Liebchen is a German word. And really what it means is sweetheart or lovely. So you would hear somebody calling somebody else Liebchen as like a term of endearment, the way that you might call somebody else honey or dear or something like that. Now we have some more words that go along with the coffee house and life in a coffee house. And the first word is a hoe cake. And it's pretty similar to what we might consider a pancake today. It's basically an unleavened cake made with flour or cornmeal. And then it's cooked on a hoe, which is basically just a hot metal plate. So then we also have a pepper pot, which is just a fancy name for a soup or a stew. In the coffee house, they would have had something called a larder, which is basically a pantry, so where you would store like your dry goods and bottles and things like that. And then finally the word mutton. Now mutton refers to meat, and specifically it refers to lamb meat. So when you hear somebody talking about a mutton chop, that would be the same thing as a lamb chop. There are two final words we want to touch on for chapter 5, and the first word is pleurisy. And pleurisy is basically a inflammation of something called the pleura, which is the lining of your lungs. So if you had any sort of a cough or something like that back in 1793, they would refer to it as pleurisy. And then our final word is scoundrel. Now I have a picture of Jabba the Hutt here, and obviously Jabba the Hutt is not going to show up in Fever 1793, but I put him on there as an example of a scoundrel because a scoundrel basically means somebody who is a dishonorable or dishonest person. Now we have some words from chapter 6, and in chapter 6, Maddie encounters the laundry, and obviously doing the laundry in 1793 was very different than doing the laundry today. The first thing that Maddie would have to do with clothing or sheets or linens or things like that would be to put them through something called a mangle. And a mangle is basically a machine that presses the clothes. And then when clothes needed to dry, they would be hung on something called a clothes horse. Our other two words from chapter 6 are fripperies, which basically refers to old clothes. So the dress would be an example of an old item of clothing. It could mean, though, an item of clothing that somebody owned that they don't really use much anymore. Or it's maybe a fancy occasion item that they don't wear very often. The other word is spinster, and you may have heard the term spinster before, but just to clarify, so basically what a spinster means is a woman who is single, and she's usually beyond the socially acceptable age for getting married. So keep in mind that we've already heard a bunch of times in the book about Maddie. Her mom and her mom trying to find her a husband, and so being only 14, that seems like it might be really early, but back in the 1700s, that was not unusual. So somebody who's maybe in their early 20s could be considered a spinster because people didn't live as long. People got married at much younger ages, so people were expected to get married at young ages, and so if they didn't, they would be considered a spinster. We only have 3 words to touch on from chapter 7, and the first word is hovel. And hovel is basically a small, dirty living space. So nobody in our book is living in a hovel, but you might hear something else described as being a hovel. Like if you left your bedroom unclean for a while and your stuff was everywhere, somebody might describe it as a hovel or like a hovel. The second word we have is brocaded, and I put a picture of a dress here because it's a very elegant dress. So brocaded means something that would be elaborately designed, maybe would have a lot of ruffles or embroidery or things like that. And then the last word we have is damask, which is a type of fabric, and you probably have maybe even seen damask fabric today, but generally it's reversible. It's got some embroidery and a pattern. A lot of times you'll see maybe curtains or a sofa has a damask pattern to it. Now we have some words for chapter 8. The first word we have is harumphed, and basically it's just somebody who maybe is loudly clearing their throat. It's a sound they might make. I believe grandfather, you'll see, will be making that sound in chapter 8. The constable would be the term for a police officer back in the 1700s. So that would be the person who would help keep order. And then finally, another word we have for chapter 8 would be gumption. And I put the We Can Do It poster here because gumption basically means initiative or courage. So if somebody has a lot of gumption, they have a lot of courage or they take a lot of risks, but good risks. They try things. And then our last 3 words for chapter 8, we have an almshouse, which an almshouse is a private house for the sick or the poor, and this is actually a picture of the Friends Almshouse in Walnut Street in Philadelphia, so it gives you an idea of kind of what it looked like. The term broadsheet, you would know today as a newspaper, so you'll hear them saying that they're reading a broadsheet or they're printing a broadsheet, and that's basically what it means. And then finally, you'll hear the word pestilence a lot, and pestilence is a deadly or an epidemic disease. So you'll hear them say that they want to get rid of the pestilence that's going around. And if you have made it to the end of the video, our mystery word or our secret word is sunflower. So if we ask you what the secret word was, you can tell us sunflower and we will know that you watched the video. Thanks for watching.